Hey guys, so the learning objective I chose today is the first learning objective of week 2, and it's considered both ethological and ecological factors that influence development. So to actually understand the factors that impact upon development, it's important to understand what ethology and ecology actually are. So to start off with ethology here, ethology looks at human and animal behavior from an evolutionary trait perspective. So we don't actually learn these behaviors from the environment around us, we inherit them from previous generations. So specifically, it looks at the impact of nature over nurture. So one of the foundation theories of ethology is Darwin's theory of evolution, and this will help provide a background and a context to the factors that we're going to later talk about that impact upon development. So Darwin's theory of natural selection is simply the idea that organisms with more favorable traits are more likely to reproduce and thus become more widespread within a population, and traits that are less favorable are less likely to become common in this population. So what do I mean by the word favorable here? Favorable just simply means you're more likely to survive within the environment. So now we're going to look at ethological factors that impact upon development. And John Bowlby argues here that infants smiling, crying, and grasping are built-in social signals that encourage the caregiver to approach. So this idea of built-in pretty much means that infants and babies don't learn this from the external environment, but it's passed on generation to generation. And these social signals help encourage the caregiver to approach and give care. So on this side, we've got some more ethological factors. And firstly, we've got this idea of a trigger response. And so this trigger response occurs when a parent or a caregiver smiles at a child. And this smile helps elicit a relaxation within the child. It helps calm the child or infant down. Secondly, we've got this earlier idea of infant crying on the previous slide. And then thirdly, we've got this idea of attachment to primary caregiver. And some people actually confuse with being an ecological factor, but it's very much an ethological idea, whereby if you have a strong connection to your caregiver, you're more likely to survive within the environment. And then fourthly, we got this idea of critical windows. So critical windows is pretty much like a period in time in which development is most vulnerable. I'll go into more detail on the next slide. So this slide here helps explain the idea of critical windows very well. So if you look on the left-hand side here, you see particular areas of the body which can be vulnerable during certain times in development, and those times are on the right-hand side. So let's give an example. So let's say the mother during the 11th week after conception was exposed to a large dosage of radiation. And due to this large dosage of radiation, it may affect the heart, the eyes, the genitalia, the teeth. It can have a large and long-term impact upon the baby. So it's very important that during these critical windows or critical periods that this baby is cared for and is safe. So to this point, we've looked at what is ethology and what are the ethological factors that can impact upon development. So now we're going to look at what is ecology. And ecology looks at human and animal behavior within the context of environmental factors. And this encompasses both the natural lived world as well as the social world. So specifically, ecology looks at the impact of nurture over nature. So within ecology, we've got this idea of natural environmental factors. So the example I like to give here to explain this is of growing up in Australia versus South Korea. You'd have a differing religion, a differing political system. You'd even have differing values being passed on generation to generation due to different religions being more predominant in different countries. And then secondly, we got this idea of the social world or human-made environmental factors. So the example I like to give here is growing up in a city as opposed to growing up in a rural area. So there might be differing education opportunities, differing work opportunities, differing friendships, maybe in a different culture, or maybe religion and community are more valued in the rural area. So you can live very differing lives in these two areas. So under ecology, we've got ecological systems theory. And this is proposed by Yuri Bronfenbrenner, excuse my French, but he provides a theory looking at how an individual's interaction with their environment can actually impact upon their development. So under ecological systems theory, we've got 5 components. So the first component of this theory is of the microsystem. And in simple terms, this is our immediate environment, our direct environment that we have in our lives. So this can include your school, your family, your friends, your church, your neighbors, pretty much everyone that you have in your immediate environment. So the second component of this theory is of the mesosystem. And the mesosystem involves the relationships between the microsystems in an individual's life. So this might mean your family experience may be related to your school experience. So the example I got here is if a child is neglected by his parents, he may have a low chance of developing a positive attitude towards his teachers due to being neglected by his parents. So the third component of this theory is of the exosystem. And the exosystem refers to connections that may exist between two or more settings. Now, one of these settings may not involve the child directly, but it may affect them indirectly. So what do I mean by this? So the example I like to give here is a father is continually passed promotion by his boss, so he doesn't get his promotion, and he goes home and he takes it out on his child. So the workplace did not directly involve the child, but affects them indirectly. The next component of this theory is of the macrosystem. And the macrosystem is composed of the child's beliefs and values. And this also includes the political and economic systems of the wider society. So, for example, children in war-torn areas will experience a different kind of development than children in peaceful areas. So, for example, a child is raised in the Middle East as opposed to Australia. A very differing experience that actually might impact upon their development. The last component of this theory is of the chronosystem. And the chronosystem looks at the dimension of time, looks at the change and constancy over a period of time. So this may include a change in family structure, address. This might even include large-scale changes, such as depressions and wars, and eventually even death. So this slide provides a basic overview of the different components of this theory. So the last section of this presentation will look at how we can encompass both ecology and ethology together in a broader theory. So this broader theory is of epigenetic psychobiological systems theory, and one of the most well-known psychologists in this area is of Gilbert Gottlieb, and he views that the development of an individual is dependent on both the interaction of biological forces and environmental forces that form a larger system, arguing that these systems impact upon every other system. So these systems include environmental, behavior, neural activity, and genetic activity. So an example of these factors interacting. So if we think about our changing environment, so farming, building cities, polluting, using sanitary measures to help fight diseases, think coronavirus, these factors help change our culture, in turn maybe changing our biological evolution. So this is it. Hopefully I covered the dot points sufficiently. Thanks for listening.